What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions episode. My name is Cameron Selby. We are going to be breaking down the Week 6 NFL Showdown slate between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants. Yes, we have another divisional round showdown. We're going to be doing that for the next couple of weeks, and I'm very excited to break this one down just because this pricing is some of the worst you might ever see. But if you think that, everybody else thinks that too. So the ownership might be spread out all over the place. There's not going to be a ton of chalky guys. There definitely won't be any chalky plays on this slate, which could make that really fun. And you never know when that big one's going to hit. Sometimes you can like something, but it's really obvious, and a lot of people are going to be dabbling up to it. Most recently, the Chiefs and Jags. A lot of people could easily afford what they wanted to, and it just came down to, did you double quarterback correctly, and did you stack correctly? And at the end of the day, that's what ended up going down. In the grand scheme of things, they've been some exciting showdowns in recent weeks to watch. A lot of them coming down to the wire, and whether or not they're profiting, that's another story. But at the end of the day, we want really good football games as well. And if we can make money along the way, then that just makes it even better. So please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Join the discussion. We're going to be doing stuff in Discord, college football, NFL, all that fun stuff. We've been doing really good on our parlays of late, and we're going to look to continue rolling right into this week as well. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So jumping into it, the first one is going to be starting off talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm going to change over to the flex pricing. I'm talking about the pass catchers. It's self-explanatory, but also very frustrating. Talking about this team just because of the fact that, man, oh man, like, you can't trust them from a week-to-week basis on what they do. It's a weird team. I mean, kudos to them being 4-1, but from a fantasy perspective, anybody that has a bunch of Eagles ownership is really kind of grinding their teeth, kicking themselves for stuff because the consistency is just not there in a lot of regards. There's a lot of guys on the team that there's just no floor, and there's too many good, talented skill players on this team for it to be that way. But starting it off, I mean, talking about A.J. Brown, arguably top 5, 6, 7 receiver in football, but he doesn't show that from a statistical perspective based on the recent sample size, basically nearly year sample size as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. 1 touchdown through 5 games thus far, and really has been an absolute dud based on where he was drafted as a mid to late second round pick in best ball and redraft platforms both. He did have a boom game in the comeback victory against the Los Angeles Rams, where they were down 19, so they were forced to throw the ball, and kudos to them coming back and win. He was a big part in this, so was Devontae Smith. Jalen Hurts had an awesome game, but otherwise, it's been very, very frustrating. Week one, he was kind of dealing with a hamstring coming back from that, so easing him in, but also literally no targets until the final drive. It's absolutely not what you want to see from him. Followed that up, a gross game against Kansas City, where he only gets to 27 yards. Fast forward 2 weeks later after the comeback win, and in a game where they're playing from ahead a lot, 2 catches for 7 yards. And then last week, where once again they're playing from ahead, 5 catches, 43 yards. Once again, will not get it done. And then on the showdown pricing, again, I don't know what they were doing, but essentially season high pricing if you are talking about a showdown perspective. And basically everybody is. And you really have to make some decisions. But at the same time, it's not like he can't on a single showdown pay off. The only problem is I'm just not going to have the confidence. It's a vibes play if you're going to feel it that way. I mean, he and Devontae Smith, they're interchangeable sometimes. It is a matchup that really presents itself well to the Giants are bottom 3 against receivers in its entirety this season. And then flipping it over to Devontae in the same sample size, A.J. Brown has been in, at least in the last 2 of the last 3 games, he's gone over 20 fantasy points. But again, $9,600, damn, you got to spend up for him. And both of these guys offer similar ceilings, similar bad floors. Obviously, 2 games. Obviously, you see the 2-game sample size against Philly and Tampa Bay both, where he scored below 5 fantasy points. And even the game where you see that he finished with 9.3 against Kansas City, he led the team in receiving yards. But at the end of the day, 9.3 fantasy points is not going to get the job done at this price tag. So he needs to be at that 20-point threshold, the 22. And because of both of these guys in good matchups, but on one of the worst passing teams in terms of passing volume opportunity, it's just kind of really boom or bust for a lot of these guys. At the end of the day, you got to really fit some of them in. Dallas Goedert apparently is really a legit red zone threat. All 4 games that he's played this year, at least 10 fantasy points. 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games is very, very impressive. But you also see that he hasn't gone above 50 receiving yards. 2 of the 4 games, he's been 4 targets or less, and it's been touchdown or bust dependent. So I think because of that, and because he's really the only guy that's not 9,600 and above, I think there will be a little bit more ownership on him. But at the end of the day, are you going to ride the wave of the 4 touchdowns and 3 game sample size for a tight end? Or are you going to kind of transition and pivot a little bit? That's something that I think it's some manipulation of ownership is really how I would attack this slate. Not to get too analytical on it, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's really how we have to present this slate because I don't really have confidence in many of these guys at all from a pricing standpoint. Even Jahan Dotson is a wide receiver 3. Each of the last 3 games, he's been by far third best on the team in terms of target, by far the third best in terms of snap share. 2 of the games being over 70%, one of them being right around 55%. But it's not like it's really leading to anything for the 5 game. In the last 4 games, he's had 3 receptions and no more than 3 targets in any of the games. He's 3,400. It just doesn't feel like there's a floor there for you to spend there compared to other temporaries. Again, whatever. I mean, a touchdown might get you there, but at the end of the day, because of all the high price options you got to afford, it's going to be really hard to commit yourself to really go that direction with Jahan Dotson. I mean, $3,400 projected less than 4 fantasy points. Like, it doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence, if I'm being honest. If it's touchdown or bust and he's the one that scores, whatever. If that's the case, then there's going to be a lot of options down low that's just mix and match these cheap guys. Well, all of them are low floor, not even really any ceiling, and they're like between $3,000 and $4,000, and all of them feel gross. So I can't really give you a strong play behind any of these guys. I will say Grant Calcaterra, who's been number 2 on the team in terms of snap share as a tight end, for the most part. He's had 3 games where he's flirted with at least 50% or more. 1 game specifically going for 88%, and that was the game without Dallas Goedert. So, kind of a little bit of an up and down performance. And when they were playing from down 19 against the Rams, they obviously were playing way less 2 tight end sets, so he didn't play at all basically in that game. But he left early after getting 2 catches for 18 yards early in the Week 5 matchup. And as of this moment, recording on a Tuesday evening, he's been a non-participant and leaving the game, not returning, considered non-participant early on in the week and then on a short week as well. And traveling, I usually anticipate that people don't play in those regards. If it's a star, maybe there's a little bit more emphasis for them to have a role. But if it's not, then I would assume that they won't play. But with that said, if you're going to be talking about him, there's you're mixing and matching down low to see maybe that opens up some value. It's not going to feel pretty, but I think that's kind of what you might have to do on this slate in those regards. In terms of the 2 obvious options, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, basically both running backs, but Saquon, I don't know if something's up with him or they just are frustratingly not using him how they should. And having 4 touchdowns in 5 games is nothing to sneeze at, but a lot of very inefficient performances. Last week, I actually wanted to take some sprinkles because it was a really strong matchup against Denver based on what they recently allowed to the Chargers and the Indianapolis Colts with their good running games. 17.8 was okay, but 6 rushing attempts in a game when you were playing from ahead, I'm kind of confused. Basically, he salvaged himself with a long touchdown reception. Other than that, it was his most efficient game of the season in terms of, yards per touch, but it's not like it inspired a lot of confidence. That said, you got the revenge game narrative, and last year against the New York Giants in his only game sample size because of the last game of the year, he did hold out infamously and not go for that rushing record because they were locked into the 1 seed. And so with that said, the only game sample size he has, he went for 20 opportunities, went for 187 yards and a touchdown, nearly 30 fantasy points against the Giants. Giants are bottom 8 against running back so far this year. He is the most expensive. You can pick yourself into the narrative discussion. In terms of non-quarterbacks, he might be the most popular or most rostered. But it's not like I feel as great about him as I did last year, especially the end of the season where he was just knew he was going to have that 5-box floor. And, he had the pass catching upside. He had the breakaway runs, and he hasn't broken away anything this year. Other than the 47-yard touchdown reception, his longest play through 5 weeks has been 17 yards. So he's not showing the explosive plays. Maybe they are coming. Maybe this is a game that one of those really kind of breaks out. Well, 11-6, you got to pay up to find out. Jalen Hurts, another guy that usually you were thinking saw the floor because the tush push game. Yes, he has 4 rushing touchdowns. All of them came in the first 3 weeks, but his passing volume has just kind of not been there in a lot of games. Some of them, at least in the last 3, he's had 7 touchdowns, 0 picks. That sounds impressive on paper, but then you kind of dive a little deeper, and it just feels like a lot of it was the Ram game where he salvaged coming back. It was an impressive performance. Tampa Bay, he had 0 passing yards in the entire second half. You don't really see that in 2025 with quarterbacks. So that's kind of concerning. In the Denver game, 280, sneaky 2 touchdown. I think overall it might have been one of his better games of the year. But at the same time, they didn't get the job done, and he just kind of left with about 19 and a half. I still think he might be one of the safer plays on the entire slate, but at the same time, you don't really get many stackable possibilities if you're attempting to spend up for a high-priced New York Giant, because obviously both of his receivers, his big two, are at least 9,600. You got Saquon Barkley at 11.6. You got 2 New York Giants above 10,000. You got to cut ties somewhere, and a lot of people are probably going to do so with one or both of the Eagle receivers. So it's going to be a unique, unnatural feeling build that we typically do with quarterbacks. But at the end of the day, because he does have rushing upside, push upside, he can get there without either. But typically, we don't love just going easily, no pass catcher builds with quarterbacks of this caliber. Now, in terms of the New York Giants, what are we going to make of this team? At least in the last month, every game has been competitive. The Dallas game shooting out 40-37 as a final, where Russell Wilson, who was his last great start, had 500 yards. And in the following week, he ends up having a poor performance against Kansas City. It was kind of an ugly game, but the Giants were more in that game than the 9-22 score indicates. Kemp Scatterboo, that was also his breakout game. Following week, in Jackson Dart's debut, he takes down the undefeated Los Angeles Chargers. Only passes for 100 yards, but he gets there with 54 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown, especially when he was only 4,500 on the main slate. That was a really good, strong value for 19.8. The following week, they lose to the winless Saints. So you win in your debut against an undefeated team, then you lose the following week as a pick'em against a winless team that hasn't really been, that they're not going to be in a ton of games this entire season. So what to make of that, I don't know. Jackson Dart, really solid debut. I would say a B performance. And then the following week, 3 turnovers. And so here we go. I think he has a really solid rushing floor, but it's kind of disappointing that he is priced up this much. 10-2, a lot to go against a Philadelphia defense that it doesn't appear as good as we thought they would be on paper, or as good as they were last season in terms of wreaking havoc. But at the same time, they're licking their chops because it's a rookie quarterback on a primetime slate. So this could be a situation where he could be a little turnover happy or prone. But I do at least like the opportunity that they're giving him, and it does feel like this offense is more dynamic. Unfortunately, we're just not going to see what it looks like because he's basically only had half a game sample size with Malik Neighbors now that he is out for the year. And then in terms of the other high-priced New York Giant, Cam Scatterboo, Tyrone Tracy, it sounds like there is a good possibility he might return on this short week, which is fun and interesting. I still think that Cam Scatterboo's done enough to earn being the 1A, or at least still have his solid role. That said, $10,000, that's really a lot. He has had 7+ targets in 2 of the last 3 games, which is really impressive. He was a all-around back in Arizona State at the end when he was basically just getting the ball in any which way possible. He hasn't been entirely efficient as a runner. But at the same time, Philly's been kind of stout somewhat against the running back position. It's kind of hard to make of it because you got the Dallas game where Javonte Williams, 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. So that's going to skew some things. Then you play Kansas City, who has one of the worst run schemes / attacks in football right now in terms of reliability fantasy point-wise. Unless they're running for 1-yard touchdowns, nobody is really getting there of far or of late. You got the Rams game, which was a shootout. Kyron got about 111 all-purpose yards in the score. The following week, Bucky Irving, 150 all-purpose yards, largely helped and aided by a long 72-yard touchdown reception. And then the following week against the Denver Broncos, J.K. Dobbins falls into the end zone, gets 15 fantasy points. So Cam Scatterboo, because he does have some pass catching upside, can get you there. You just got to pay a premium for him. And I didn't expect him to be 10,000, but you got to play some Giant. And if price didn't matter, he might be the safest of all of the Giants to play in terms of the skill players. So 10,000, that's just a decision you're going to have to make one way or the other. Ownership does really seem spread out amongst everybody, but it does seem like Cam Scatterbo in terms of the guys above 10 above $9,000, which there are 6 of them, he is going to be the lowest owned guy. So just make with that information what you will. They are a 7-point underdog at home, but the last time they were a big underdog at home, that was his breakout game where he went for 24 fantasy points against the Kansas City Chiefs on primetime football. So make of that what you will. I think I might be interested in being overweight. Usually we play 3 lines, and I think you can get through 1 out of 3. The big question about this slate, Darius Slayton sounding like he's going to be out. Left the game, did not return against the Saints due to a hamstring injury in his first game sample size without Lee Neighbors in the lineup. So now it's basically Wandale, who hasn't really shown anything of fantasy relevance since the breakout performance against the Giants. But he can get you there, 7,200 reasonable price for what I would expect his target share to be. It's Jalen Hyatt, it's Bo Collins, and while Jalen Hyatt got about 47% of the snaps in his third game of the season, obviously that was a season high, largely because of Lee Neighbors being out, and then also with Darius Slayton leaving the game later in the fourth quarter. And then Bo Collins, once again, similar story where he's just trended up in terms of the snap share. But guess what? Neither have done yet anything to warrant being picked. Jalen Hyatt has not had a reception this year. Bo Collins has 1 catch for 7 yards, and they're both $3,000 plus. So doesn't excite you whatsoever, does it? Theo Johnson got into the end zone last week twice, getting there on 7 targets, 6 for 33 and 2 scores. He's had 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. I didn't expect him to be $5,800 though. So yeah, he's probably I would say top 3 pass catching option overall, including Cam Scatterbo. But if you're just talking the receiving corps, he's obviously behind Wandale, is going to be the second most targeted guy, but he's $5,800. I didn't like that price tag when I saw it initially come out, but he can get there. The only thing is it's just going to make it very interesting and weird in pricing, having to fit multiple of these kind of mid-tier and mid-price guys in there. You've got Gunnar Olszewski, who might be elevated in play. He's had 1 snap this entire year, and he's $1,000. So I guess his 1 snap is warranted being priced up to non-minimum price play. It's just really ugly down here. I mean, Devin Singletary is okay and reasonable if Tyrone Tracy doesn't play, but again, it sounded like there's a good chance he will. If he doesn't, he's played 25 or 32% in the last 2 games without Tyrone Tracy in the lineup, and that's kind of led to about 7-ish touches in both games, and that's led to 7 touches in both games. So, I mean, he'll touch the ball, and he's $2,000, but obviously if Tyrone Tracy's in, he's going to be a non-factor. So that just kind of goes that dream if that's the case. It's really ugly, man. But at the same time, that could just lead to a ton of fun. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll go through some of our game scripts, must plays, and all that fun stuff. Must plays, Emery and I are on a similar boat. Mine going with Saquon Barkley. I'm just going to buy the narrative. I'm kind of nervous because his volume's been a little inconsistent. But again, it's against the Giants, his former team. It's primetime football. He's going to be projected really well. He might pull some ownership. I don't know how negatively leveraged he'll be, but I just feel like he's a guy that I want to fit in my lines. I have to pick one, and you got to say you have to pick 100% of said one person of the top 6 that you're playing. I think he might be my guy and dog in this fight. Emery, on the other hand, he's going to go Jalen Hurts, $600 cheaper at $11,000. Kind of a similar thing, just liking the floor of 19 plus points. That'll probably be enough on a gross slate like this. I think if you believe it'll be ugly, low scoring, even 19, which probably won't get it done on a regular slate, won't get it done in your fantasy lineups or it won't get it done on the main slate. It won't get it done in your redraft leagues. But 19 on this showdown, I think can really get it, especially if you don't think it'll be a shootout. So he does offer a pretty solid floor, and he is probably the safest guy to play. And him being 600 cheaper than Saquon, I thought was interesting enough to where I think that's completely fine. In terms of fades, there's 6 guys that are priced 9,600 and above. You got to pick somebody to have 0% of. I don't care who it is. If you're doing 3 max, if you do 20, maybe you sprinkle in everybody. But I like being way I like taking significant stands in one way or the other in my beliefs. Don't always work out, but at the end of the day, I have enough belief in myself to go with that, even if it has to be a 5 thing. My fade is going to be Jackson Dart on a short week coming off a 3 turnover game against the New Orleans Saints. I think that Philly can kind of shut them down to where they're a 1 touchdown scoring team, if that. With Darius Slayton being out, Malik Neighbors being out, I think that they could be struggling to get the ball rolling. And if they do, and they're held to 2 touchdowns or less, and he's involved 1 time, I don't know if he'll really get there at that price point. I'd rather gamble on the lower ownership that might present itself for the cheaper receivers that might correlate your line a little better. And with that said, that's just kind of the uncomfortable stand that I'm going to take, even though he has had at least 50 rushing yards in both starts, which does present a pretty solid floor for a rookie quarterback. In terms of Emery's fade, he's going to be fading A.J. Brown, more so because of his inconsistency, and it's largely due to his lack of usage. 4 games this year below 10 fantasy points and him being 9,800. Yes, he has to have his ceiling performance to work out for you, and he's capable of doing that. But we're just bucking the trends, and if we do expect it to be once again another ugly night, then I think it's going to be hard to play both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So if you have conviction in one or the other, go for it. I think Devontae will probably be lower owned of the two. And so I just hope that, we're on the right side of things. But it's not like I can give you any kind of conviction. It's a great matchup for both, but both can go off, but both have way lower floors than their talents probably warrant. In terms of tournament plays, speaking of this matchup, I actually like Devontae Smith because I do think that he might be the lowest owned Eagle of the core group of guys. Dallas got it going off in recent weeks with 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. And combine that with the fact that Devontae is 96, right below A.J. Brown, he's not going to project well. If people try to get Jalen Hurts, Saquon, they're probably only going to be able to afford one more guy of those big tier up top. And if that's going to be the case, then I'd rather take a chance and manipulate some ownership, get overweight to a guy that I think will be less than 30% owned. Emery's tournament play is actually going to be Philadelphia's defense/special teams. I actually don't know how people are going to treat their ownership of their defense. Usually in games of lower totals, in games of just kind of unconfident stuff, and on top of that, when defense are priced above kickers, a lot of people kind of flock away from it. But at the same time, 54 is not a crazy price for what we would expect. I think New Orleans finished last week after a fumble return for a score with 18 fantasy points, so that would be awesome on a showdown slate if they are able to run one back. And obviously, if that was not the case, 12 is still really, really solid. So yeah, I think that's a very fair. I think that's a very fair call. If they are going to be putting up less than 20 actual real life points, they could very well get that 10-point threshold, and possibly even more depending on how successful they are against that offensive line. Game script wise, I'm going to say that Philly wins this, but it is not going to be as much of a blowout as the spread will indicate. They are 7-point road favorites, and I think that the Giants playing a lot of people close this year, outside of New Orleans, who they were ahead of for half of the game. New Orleans kind of broke away with that fumble return touchdown to win by 2 possessions, but they've been feisty. I wouldn't just kind of discount that they're just going to be a bottom feeder team. It is a rivalry game, and I think they will show up to play. And on top of that, Philly, it's not like their offense is high power caliber, and maybe they can break out against this Giants defense. But I think the Giants defense is actually better than a lot of people give them credit for. Their numbers aren't going to indicate that, but it's not like Philly's offense is indicating that they're going to be putting up a ton of points. Gross price slate, and it doesn't excite me both high or low, but at the end of the day, I think this will be a clunky game. It might be really weird. I don't think we've been doing a lot of slates lately where you've been able to leave a lot of salary on the table because of an obvious chalky option. There is not that on this slate. So I'm not going to be going with the approach of, every line has to be $500+ remainder. Because yes, it might be Duke, but I think the ownership's going to be spread out enough to where you can get different in other ways. Like I said, I think at the end of the day, I think Philly just kind of grinds a win away. And if they're a 24-20 kind of opportunity, that's not going to excite me. But hopefully we have enough players to work the line to end up cashing in that regard. He's kind of in a similar boat. He doesn't like the over. He's picking them under. Philly 20-10 is his final. So he's actually going the other side of this spread. Giants have scored in the opening drive in the last 2 games, but still only put up 21 and 14 points. Game feels like a massive under. And Philly has not played well, but the Giants, he believes, is not very good. Tough overall slate, but he think it could be a double kicker, single defense, kind of stacking the way you need to. Basically finding the floor plays on this slate and ride with them. And he's gonna view this as a point of going with Jalen Hurts, Saquon, kickers mixing and matching. That's really kind of how he indicates. Problem is, I don't think that this is a slate that you can do a lot of that, because if you do go with a Jalen Hurts, Saquon, and trying to fit in both kickers, you have no money left, I don't think. And we'll get into some builds in a second to really talk about all this stuff. And we'll play around a little bit and do some matching and see what kind of options we can find. Showdown, props of the night. Again, there's not a lot out there because there's a couple injury news that we're waiting on. But right now, and it has gone up a couple yards as of this recording, but Saquon Barkley over 100 all-purpose yards is what I'm going to be going with. 190 all-purpose yards against his former team last year in his only game sample size. And I think this is a game that, I don't know if there is a breakaway run, but I think they'll kind of grind him away as long as he is healthy enough to do so. I know he was kind of limited on Monday, but it sounded like he just kind of was banged up on Sunday. Hopefully it's much ado about nothing, but if it sounds like he is more banged up than it indicates, and report comes out game day that no, like they're might be limiting him, he really is kind of banged up more than the public is letting on, then that might be something where we have to reassess our situations and our lineups. Emery, on the other hand, he's going to be kind of correlating with what his fade was. He's going to be saying under A.J. Brown, 64.5 receiving yards. The scary thing is he can get there to the over 64.5, but not paying out based on his price point. So that's a really tough thing to kind of balance. But if he's feeling that good about fading A.J. Brown in its entirety, I'd say just kind of correlate with how you are. I will say and note that it is, in terms of, I did look at reception props for the 2 Philadelphia Eagles receivers, and it's actually a higher boost for A.J. Brown to have at least 5.5 catches compared to Devontae Smith. Slightly less of a boost if you went the Devontae Smith route. So that sounds like there's a slight edge to Devontae having more of an opportunity in volume. So if that's the case, then Vegas kind of is leaning that way as well. It might be an even harder showdown from a props perspective than it is from this price point, which is saying something because it's really, really ugly, and we're going to have some really, really tough lines that we're going to make. But everybody's feeling that way, so you just never know. Coming back over to DraftKings, we'll kind of get into some lineup making. Starting out from a captain perspective, I think this is a slate that you should not be afraid of the zero. And if that's the case, then they're $200. That just allowed you to fit 4 of the top 6 in your line. That might be the direction I might be leaning as of this moment, is going a lot of high-low and not even worrying about the zero, with the ability to afford an expensive captain and 3 others, if that's even possible, compared to trying to fit 2 of them and then just a bunch of mid-tier plays. So with my first look, let's go ahead and play around. And so I'm going to go ahead and put in Saquon as my must play at captain. I'm going to put in Jalen Hurts. I'm going to put in Devontae Smith. Already just only 4,000 per. Really tough because a lot of these guys down here, and I talked about them, Jahan Dotson, Jalen Hyatt, Bo Collins, they don't deserve to be this high price based on their lack of opportunity and volume so far. Jahan Dotson, less than 2 catches the last 4 games. You got Jalen Hyatt, yet to get a catch. Bo Collins, 1 catch. That's it. Daniel Bellinger had 452 last week, but less than 2 catches and only 1 target in 3 of the previous 4 games. Besides that, Tank Bigsby has been just 0 for 0 for 0 since he's been traded over there. I will say that I think that this opens up me leaning towards who might be my cheap guy, and that is Kylan Granson. Main point being, he's had 2 receptions this year. He's $200. And in last week's game, where Grant Calcaterra left the game, only played 7 snaps. Kylan Granson came in, played 22 snaps the rest of the game. 36% was by far the by far the most of the next two. Cameron Latu was next up, but he only played 2 of the snaps. So with that said, $200, he's going to be in the game. I just need to catch. And even if I don't, whatever, I am able to afford a higher captain, and it allows you to really bump up your price point. If you want to, we still need a New York Giant at some point. Even if you went up to Dallas Goedert at 64, that's not really gonna. There's not a mid-tier price that you can't afford Theo Johnson, and then you got to go to whoever the Giants kicker is going to be. Jude McAdamy has kicked the last 2 games, but they did sign Younghoe Koo, the former Falcon. He hasn't played since the Atlanta Falcons cut him post week 1, but it sounds like they're going to compete. So whoever is the Giants kicker, they're going to be $4,600. I think they're in play, but I don't like the build going that direction. I would rather get up from Dallas Goedert to a Wan'Dale Robinson. And I know you get the 0. Let's put Jude in there until further notice. I don't know anything about him, but I know about Younghoe Koo, and I know he has pinned out on showdowns before. This leaves you 0. It's a 4-2 build, basically a 1.5 build. But you get 3 expensive guys. You get the most expensive one, a captain, and it allows you to just kind of. And even if I eat a 0 at this $200, as long as I really get a either optimal or a really strong captain in terms of these top guys, I think it might be worth it. But jumping over as another look, showing that we're not needing to go, let's go with Emery's must play at captain. Let's go with Emery's must play at captain and Jalen Hurts. 16.5. Probably would put in Saquon anyways. He's fading A.J. Brown. But Devontae Smith does make sense if you can afford that. It's not like you've had an extra amount of money if you do, but if he wants to play Eagles defense / special teams, let's see what we can try to make that work and happen. Even if you put that in, that's max $6,900 left. So you can't really afford a whole lot. So that's double punting on these ugly receivers. Maybe 2 of these guys pan out, and you just mix and match. Whether it is Jahan Dotson and Bo Collins, Jalen Hyatt, maybe Jalen Hyatt, who used to be a deep threat, has a little bit more explosiveness to where he can pan out. Maybe that makes sense and works. If he doesn't like that, maybe we put in his tournament play, go there, and then if we go up, that still doesn't get you enough for a Wan'Dale Robinson. You can probably convince yourself that it would be fine if you pivoted from the Eagles defense, say you win a kicker with Jake Elliott as a safe guy, and then whoever you want, last guy in between Hyatt and Bo Collins. That's fine, I guess. Like I said, I'm not going to have a lot of conviction on a lot of these lines because all these guys down low, below 5,000, you hate from a regular perspective. It's not like you're going to be having confidence playing the Eagles as a touchdown dog, but $3,600, like whatever, maybe they get more sacks and some turnovers, have an upset win possibility. Will Shipley has barely played, so why is he $4,400? A.J. Dillon has barely played. I don't know why he is $4,000, but at the same time, if Saquon, for some reason, they hold him out this week, Will Shipley is in play, and he might be the must and chalk of the slate. But for the time being, Saquon's good to go, and they are out of the player pool entirely because I don't just see a scenario where $4,400 Will Shipley or A.J. Dillon paying out. One of these guys could. It might just be one catch for 40 yards, and that's all you need. But I don't know who it would be. But if Darius Slayton is out, money makes sense that it would be one of the 2 Giant receivers. So just do with that information what you will. Take Bigsby, like I said, non-factor. Devin Singletary might be the best under $4,000 play if Tyrone Tracy remains out, just because the only 2 games that he did play without Tyrone in the lineup, he did have 7 touches in both games. He got 2 targets last game. So that, I don't even know if gets it done for you, getting 3 fantasy points. But there is opportunity for more in the event that they are playing from behind and they use less Kim Scatterbo. Just what it's worth. Let's try to do a mid-tier captain. Maybe that this is a weird slate where if Emery thinks that the Eagles defense is going to force the Giants offense with 13 points or below, which he predicted that they would score 10, that is minimum 4 on top of any additional fantasy points that Philly's defense allows. So maybe they're a possible captain. In that regard, I think you can afford 4 of these guys up top, allegedly. Let's see what we can do, though. So say you put in both of those. let's try to afford one of these expensive Giants. They're both the same price if you have conviction in Jackson Dart, whatever. I mean, it makes sense going with another kicker. Let's say Jake Elliott for this instance. And then with that said, the last guy in, it could be Jahan Dotson. It could be Jalen Hyatt. You leave a couple bucks on the table. It's not like you can afford anything with that extra dollars unless you're trying to go away elsewhere. But it's just worth noting. Let's say that Jalen Hyatt is a guy that inherits some of the most snaps and he's second most snaps on the team. Say he gets 8 points, whatever. Maybe that allows you to do other things. So maybe that's a 5-1 build, and you pick one of these Eagles receivers going there. That's exactly enough for Dallas Goedert, who's had 4 touchdowns in 3 games at captain. So that's one way for you to afford 3 guys up top. I think it's almost impossible for you to get all 4, but for shits and giggles, let's say we're going with a kicker captain, because why not, right? That's kind of a similar thing where you're just going to pick 3 up top. Probably going to be 2 of those guys, 1 of these guys, and then you're going to pick a cheap receiver, and then that's either enough for one of the 2 tight ends in Dallas Goedert, Theo Johnson, enough for Philly defense, or one of the kickers. Going double kicker has worked out a lot so far in this slate. Going double kicker has worked out a lot so far this season. Even if you did that, unfortunately, that's still not enough for Eagles D. But if you went down to a Philly receiver, that's enough. That allows you to get 3 of the guys up top. You get double kicker and defense. I mean, it's 6 guys that you don't hate anybody. The problem is you just don't have a confident captain. There's not even a guy down here that I would even be interested in as a minimum price captain. Sometimes that's fun if there's an obvious role. Kylan Granson, I just want to play around just to see if we can fit 4 up top because it's pretty insane pricing. Let's try to do those. Let's try to pick one of his receivers because let's do the highest right now. And then we'll do that. If you did no Jackson Dart, actually, what I prefer is going this route, and then you afford either or between Jackson Dart or Wan'Dale. Probably Jackson Dart, from a points perspective, has a safer floor, I would say. Maybe, allegedly. This correlates. You just have a 0 possibility at captain, but you afford 4 guys up top. You got to do the math. I don't know if that works, but you get 4 guys up top and probably the best mid play that you could play in Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know. I'd have to do some math if that actually works. Because if 4 guys up top do go for 15 plus fantasy points, maybe a 0 was enough because nobody else was able to play for it. Because say you put in one of these guys like a Devontae Smith, which is the cheapest of the guys up top. Say you click on 3 names, you've got an average of 3,000 a player. So maybe you can do a Kylan Granson down at 200. That's enough for Bo Collins, Daniel Bellinger, Devin Singletary. Maybe if you went Devin Singletary in the event that Tyron Tracy is out, that's enough for you to get up at captain to a Jalen Hurts. Or if you wanted to do the Saquon instead, that's just enough for Saquon. But because it's zeroed out, I probably side with going the Jalen Hurts route. Safety, floor, all that fun stuff. 5-1 build. I don't really care if your other and only Giant is just a dud. It just comes down to do 4 guys up top really work out. If it's going to be an ugly slate and half of those guys up top are going to be scoring less than 15 fantasy points, maybe it is a value slate and 3 will work out. I think that'll be what I'll have to anticipate playing around with. And again, Kylan Granson, who probably is the best minimum price player. And technically right now, based on RotoWire, he's the highest value on the slate, but he's still projected for 0.47 fantasy points. So it's not like it's exciting at all. He's just going to be the most popular, and I don't care about eating the 0 if I'm able to get up to the captain that I like. I wouldn't do that in the event that you are going mid-tier captain, but it's just worth noting. With that said, guys, that's all I got for you. It's a tough slate to break down, but it could be fun. You just never know when these big slates are going to work out in your favor. Last year, say this time and time again, the ugliest slate of the year was the Jets and Patriots, and that was the most profitable showdown slate for us by far in a blowout game. And it ended up just panning out. So this could be one of those games. You just never know. So always just kind of manage your bankroll, play with what you're willing to lose. And I like playing every single week and not just fading a contest. Maybe you be a little bit more overweight to a Thursday, Monday contest instead, or props instead. But actually, like I said, I think it's better as a showdown slate than it is as a prop building slate. Maybe FanDuel has better pricing. Who knows? But there's a lot of ways to manipulate, but always have fun. Always play. Just do it. It's fun. But like you maybe put more on a fantasy. Maybe FanDuel has a little bit better pricing. And sometimes that's the way I do showdowns is like, hey, FanDuel over here is a lot more fun than this one. So I might play a little bit more on FanDuel than I would on DraftKings, but play both. You just never know, like I said, when this is going to pan out. I'd always like to fire bullets if I have the funds to do so, but just manage your bankroll, be smart about it. Play what you're willing to lose, but have fun doing it. We've been having strong last couple of weeks, and we're going to look to continue and keep that ball rolling. We can't thank you guys enough. Please be on the lookout for our main slate breakdown after this game and video comes out on Friday morning, and then also Sunday live streams every Sunday morning around 9 o'clock through 11 o'clock. A couple hours, I'll be hanging out with you guys to play with a bunch of different contests on DraftKings. Talk about any questions that you got. Please fire away. And then in Discord, that's where a lot of people in our community shout out any kind of parlays, props they see going out throughout the week. So thank you guys for tuning in if you have this far. We love you guys. Can't thank you enough. And we will see you on the next one.